Welcome to Practical Business Technology, where we keep you in the know about technology's impact on business. Today's show is sponsored by the Maricopa County Bar Association, and our host is Dave Kinsey, author and owner of Total Networks. Hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm here with Dave Kinsey today.
Hi.
Hi, Dave. And today we're talking about ransomware. So, what is ransomware? Is it malware?
Yeah, it is malware. The idea is if you have your data being held ransom, you click on something that you shouldn't have clicked on, or unfortunately, or what have you, in some way that, say, an infection occurs. And what will generally happen is it may appear that nothing is happening. So it may appear that all is well, at least for the next few minutes or half hour or hour or whatever. But in the background, evil software is going to work and encrypting your data. So it means it's scrambling the ones and zeros, scrambling all your computer information with a key that theoretically somebody else has, and they're willing to give you the key to get your own data back if you pay them. So basically they're holding your data hostage, and you have to pay a ransom to get your information back.
Okay. Are there different types of ransomware?
Technically, yeah. That's a good question, actually, because you can think of, there's pure ransomware, which is where your data is encrypted and you say, hey, haha, I got your data here. If you'd like it back, pay me in Bitcoin to get your information back. There's also what's called scareware. The idea being it's not your data's encrypted, but there's something trying to threaten you or scare you into paying money. So, for instance, they may say, oh, I've been watching where you're browsing, and I'm going to share your browsing history with somebody, or I know some crime that you committed, and I know whatever, and pay up.
So kind of like blackmail.
Blackmail, exactly.
Okay.
So it's extortion. So it's two different flavors of extortion, right? So you can extortion that's legitimate extortion, all extortion is illegitimate, but basically either that they really have something on you, generally they're not going to have something on you, but they're going to pretend they do. It's scareware. I guess in theory they could actually have information on you, but
probably more likely they just are making it up. They don't really have
most likely
incriminating information. So.
Yeah. So but with ransomware, you know that they got your data because you go to access it and you're like, oh no.
I guess what happens? You can't open the file?
Yeah. So it's all scrambled. The data is useless. In general, your PC is still functioning, but all your files, all your Word documents, Excel, what have you, is all scrambled, and you don't have access to it. So once again, you may not realize you're being infected because it's sort of in the ransomware perpetrator's best interest to not have you know that an infection occurred, so that you're not immediately yanking your computer off the internet, the network, or smashing it with a hammer, shutting it down, or whatever, to stop it from doing its evil. But then because the minute you go to try to access files, they're not there.
So do you get a pop-up, or like you talked about them asking to pay a ransom? How do you know that they're asking for a ransom?
Yeah, they're going to be, they'll be very overt about it. They'll be like, your information is encrypted. Here's the Bitcoin address to send money to, and if you do that, we will restore your data.
So why do they ask for Bitcoin as opposed to U.S. dollars or?
Why not your credit card? Yeah. Visa. Yeah, MasterCard, Visa, right? It's everyone wants to, pay that. Hey, you might get points and everything, right? Even when you're getting your data back. The problem is that's very traceable, and the minute you pay it, the people like the FBI or other police may show up and arrest whoever received the payment. So there's a fairly clear trail of where the money goes. Now, cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, not so much.
Oh, so you can't trace cryptocurrency?
That's what it's designed to do. Now, it's not to say that all cryptocurrency transactions are untraceable, but if you know what you're doing and you use it correctly for how to use, correctly, for nefarious purposes, but if you are tech savvy and you know how you're using it, it's untraceable. That's the whole idea behind it. That's why it exists. It exists to basically have untraceable transactions.
So
and more. I wrote a whole book on crypto anarchy and blockchain, but
what's the name of your book?
the book is called The Blockchain Code. Don't get me started. I got myself started on it. But
well, how much is the Bitcoin worth?
That's a whole nother story. Well, what the going rate for Bitcoin is a lot. It could be tens of thousands of dollars is generally.
So if you get a thing and it says pay me 1 Bitcoin, that might be a lot of money.
Yeah, generally you have to pay a fraction of a Bitcoin. Now, once again, why is a Bitcoin worth that? There's a whole, it's because theoretically what the market will bear, or more really what people believe it is worth, and yeah.
Okay. So I've heard cases in the news where a company or a government has had to pay the ransom.
Yep.
So do you recommend that if I got infected with ransomware that I pay the ransom?
No, don't negotiate with terrorists. No. Well, that's at least generally what you want. You don't want to pay the ransom.
If you pay the ransom, will you get your data back?
Not necessarily, but generally, yes.
So usually they do follow through?
Usually they do. Oddly enough, well, I guess not oddly enough, they're viewing this as a business. And I've heard some people rave about the customer service of their ransomware attacker and how friendly they were and getting their data back in timely fashion and all. It's just so wrong. It's so wrong on so many levels. However, you don't want to remove the possibility of paying the ransom. So, in general, I have never paid a ransom, and we haven't seen, knock on wood, ransomware attack recently. But we have in the past. We've absolutely have seen ransomware, and we were able to recover from backup, and that's generally what you want to do. The idea is have defenses, stop the ransomware attack from happening, and restore from backup. However, failing that, if for some reason your backups are not available, and some ransomware has gotten sophisticated to where it's a multi-stage attack, it tries to get into your network and find your backups and disable them first. It can take weeks or whatever. It can be very
so they
elaborate.
could go in and disable your backups and you don't know it, and then a month later it encrypts, and then you're like, oh crap, I don't have backups.
I've heard stories of that happening. You want to be constantly monitoring and testing your backups, but or say for whatever reason, if the backup's not available, you don't want to lose the ability to pay the ransom, which is why if an attack happens, you want to disconnect the computer from your network. Okay, you don't want to smash it with a hammer or you don't want to touch it and remove the ransomware from it, because you want to have the ability actually to get the key and pay the ransom in the event you were not able to restore from backup. And in fact, there have been there's a story, unfortunately, of a police station of all places, a police department that paid the ransom because they had important information that they could not get back otherwise. How embarrassing and how wrong is that a police organization did it? But they didn't really have a great choice. I will say in general, most people don't want to pay the ransom, and there's been municipalities that have not paid the ransom and just and have suffered the consequences. You don't want to negotiate with terrorists. So it's a involved question whether to say to pay the ransom or not. My philosophy is hell no, don't pay the ransom.
So what I'm hearing though is it's very important to have good backups and ones that allow you to restore your data quickly.
Absolutely.
So the olden days there were tape backups, and that could take a long time to restore.
Yes.
So you need to review what backups you have, how often they're checked for making sure that the bad guys haven't gone in and disabled them. And also probably ask your IT provider, what's my restore time? How long would it take if my whole server got infected? How long would it take to restore that data? Because I suppose there might be times where someone would want to pay the ransom because they had backups, but maybe they were not ones that were set up to restore very quickly. And
perhaps, yeah. Basically,
So-
when you look at backups, there's two concepts. There's basically what's called RTO and RPO. RTO is recovery time objective. The idea is how much data you're going to lose. How far back in time can you go? How granularly can you go back in time to restore? Like if you're taking backups once a year, well, your recovery time objective is annual, whatever. And so you could lose a whole year's worth of data. That's not really going to be acceptable for most places. That's why they're like, when we take backups, we're talking about hourly backups. At a minimum daily, but generally, with what we're, an hourly, it really seems to be the minimum reasonable backup window for me. And then you also want to have your recovery RTO, the recovery time objective. How long does it take to get it back? So hopefully you can get back up and running within, say, a few hours if everything went all kablooey. In some cases, some people have taken longer.
Okay. So what are the ways that ransomware is delivered? Like how do I get infected with this malware to begin with?
Probably the best answer, the most common answer is that unfortunate click, basically phishing. So somebody sends you an email that you click on, that's a phishing message, or through an infected website.
Okay, so I could go to a website that has some ad on it, and I click on the ad thinking I'm going to a real site, and it might be that wasn't.
Yeah, that happens. And so,
Okay.
So obviously countermeasures are important, right? So you want to make sure that you've got good security is built on layers. And so the idea is you want to make sure your systems are patched so they don't have flaws, because generally the infections are exploiting a flaw in the software. You shouldn't be able to browse to a website and get infected without it exploiting a flaw. So having systems patched is one layer. Having good endpoint protection, good what you think of as kind of antivirus, anti-malware, that's a layer. Having web filtering, which can be done both at the endpoint, can be done through the network. There's just multiple layers that can be done from a technical standpoint. And then one of the most important final ones is the end user brain. So is knowing what to look for, and it's like training, basically making sure people are trained, and that's an important layer.
So how would you propose training? Is that like once a year I should have a company meeting, or are there ways
that's better than none? Mm-hmm. I would say more often than that. You can have monthly or quarterly trainings that can be emailed. Maybe have a seminar, or have somebody come into your office and provide updates. And then I would strongly recommend doing simulated phishing. So you want to ideally have people test it so that emails go into your company and you get people to click on something they're not supposed to click on, and then they're directed to training, and you get reports on, you clicked on this and that was bad. And so now they know. You can say, this is why it was bad. And you can explain to the person, show the email, this is why you shouldn't have clicked on it. Because you'd rather have that. Technically that's a failure of sorts, right? But actually that's a good failure. You'd rather have that.
Simulated phishing sounds like an excellent idea.
You'd rather have that than the actual infections.
So what about the cloud? Is there any advantage if I've got my systems in the cloud? Am I still susceptible to ransomware?
The answer is a very qualified, it's safer in the cloud. Very, very qualified. It's not always safer in the cloud. I'm saying if you have native cloud applications are wonderful. So think the simplest cloud application is say, okay, online banking, right? Where you log onto your website and you check out your bank accounts and you can do transactions all there. Your bank account is not going to get encrypted from you browsing there and doing something. It just doesn't. It's not really possible because the app, restricts it. Similarly, if you have an app where you're doing account management, you're doing whatever you need to do to manage your business, and you are managing that online through an application, it's generally safer because it's going to be the job of the application provider to manage the security, but you don't have a direct path for malware to infect your system and generally to then get at your data.
And I'm assuming you'd want to have a two-factor authentication and
Absolutely.
a strong password with those systems.
Absolutely. So, but yeah, and there are also, though, what you might call like hybrid cloud applications. Say if it's like a shared drive where you have a drive, you have a file folder on your PC that is actually stored up in the cloud. Well, that's going to get infected because it appears to your PC like a file and it's just going to get encrypted there. And so there's a lot of applications that may be susceptible in that manner. Just because it's in the cloud doesn't mean it's safe and protected, but it can. And generally the move to the cloud is a good thing for security. There's obviously you're putting a lot of trust in a third party, and you need to make sure that they're reputable. And then there's a lot of devils in the details here.
Sure. So what I'm hearing is that if it's a native cloud application that's safer, of course you need to have good login credentials and keep that part secure.
Absolutely.
But you need to be careful of anything that gets synced to your local computer.
That's one example.
Okay.
Of something where you're just as susceptible with it being in the cloud.
Well, and then you probably need to be careful because you might be encrypting the cloud backups.
And once again, we're talking, all of this is in general terms. The devil is in the details.
Sure.
For how any application works, for how anything works. But, in general, the move towards cloud is a good thing for security.
Okay. So is there anything else you'd like to add as we wrap up this discussion on our favorite topic of ransomware?
Yeah, be ready. So look at it as a potentially catastrophic event. I mean, there have been companies that have had the crap kicked out of them, frankly, that with ransomware. And
it can make you go out of business.
It can make you go out of business if you don't handle it right. So look at this. Basically, every business needs to have a disaster recovery plan. So first and foremost, to assess your risks to avoid disaster, right? So you want to do everything as a mitigation. When you look at your disaster recovery plan, you're naturally going to look at mitigating steps. But then you also want to figure out, okay, what are your remedial actions should disaster strike so that it's not such a disaster? So if you're well planned, if you have everything planned out and you have a good response, life can be good.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dave. Once again, a highly educational topic.
Thank you very much.